You're listening to This Week in America with Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America. Interesting show today, talking about Third Party, the new political thriller series. It's been called part fine political novel, part political blueprint, representing both hope and handbook. The author is Stein Nemerovski, adjunct professor at Columbia University, earned his undergrad degree at Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, law degree from the University of Illinois, been active with Illinois government and politics for the majority of his career, a parliamentarian for the Illinois House of Representatives, special counsel to the Speaker of the Illinois House, also special counsel to the CEO of Chicago Public Schools, outside general counsel to various state agencies in Illinois, a campaign manager for 3 campaigns for candidates seeking election to the Illinois House, currently president of Knell Consulting, specializing in advocacy at the state level in Illinois as well as at the national level, host of None of the Above television programming on Grassroots TV based in Aspen. And Steve Nemerovski is our guest on This Week in America. Stephen, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Rick. Pleasure to be on the show.
It is an interesting series, and we will talk about that. But first, a couple of thoughts looking back on the election of 2016. Going in, people felt if you're going to vote for a third party, not one of the traditional 2 parties, it was throwing a vote away. As you look back at the vote tally at the end of the night for the alternate candidates, what did that represent to you?
Well, I'm not one that believes in this school of throwing your vote away. In fact, I've written on it recently. And for one, that people understand, if there's a sufficient vote, the third parties actually get ballot status in 2018 and 2020. And I haven't studied it yet, but there was an article the other day on one of the websites I follow that said, in fact, the libertarians have now gained ballot status in quite a few states. So you're not throwing your vote away in that regard. And the other thing is they like to say that if you vote for a third party, you may skew the election one way or the other, but they don't really know where that vote would have gone. And in this election, I think the vote would have been pretty evenly split between Trump and Clinton. So I don't believe there were any consequences to the third party vote this time. Beyond that, having said that, though, I think this is the largest third party vote in history, and that's really saying something.
You know, it's interesting, and I throw everybody in the third party. There were several that were running pretty much nationwide. I think 2 of them were running on a nationwide basis. So what you're saying is basically it may look somewhat insignificant when you're comparing their votes to the votes for Clinton and for Trump, but it's sort of a building block. You have to start somewhere, and if you can build on that, you've got a preferred status come the next election cycle.
Yes, and that's huge for third parties, because right now they have such a significant disadvantage to get on the ballot. They spend an enormous amount of their time and resources just getting on the ballot. So now that they've gained ballot access or status rather than a lot of states, that will now free them up to spend more time on finding candidates and running better elections. It's a huge deal for the third parties.
We have seen what some are saying is a shakeup in the political system. Up to this point, the system is designed basically not to have a third party, a viable third party. Will we see coming out of this maybe people being more receptive, especially since many people didn't want to vote for either one of the major party candidates?
I definitely think that's going to be the case. And going into Tuesday night, a lot of people would have predicted that action was going to be on the Republican side of the ledger. I still think that's possible, but I now think you're going to see a lot of action on the Democratic side of the ledger, particularly with the progressives, the Bernie Sanders movement. I think there's a whole lot of people there. They're going to say, I didn't get what I wanted out of the Democratic establishment, and that's when I thought we were going to have the presidency. Now we don't have that. What are we going to do now?
It's interesting because they thought that they would follow his lead to Clinton, but it appeared that a number of them did not. So they're looking for a voice out there. What would it take to launch a viable third party? And you talk about that, and we'll get to that in a bit here, talking in the political series, the third party. What would it take to form a viable third party?
Well, I think you've got the puzzle pieces on the table right now. And again, go back to the Sanders movement. You have people that have, particularly in the Democratic primary, they've gelled around certain issues. They found leadership. They found a voice. They have found a way to connect through social media. They found a brand. All those things are incredibly important. The next step, of course, is actually to form your party. Now, on my website, noneoftheabove.us, and on a website that I work with, ballotpedia.org, we lay out the timetables that you would have to deal with. And in other words, when you'd have to have your petitions filed and things like that. Most of that doesn't start really soon, but we map that out for people who have that level of interest. But the most important thing they have to do is literally start today, November 10th, and start planning. Because one of the things I think the current third parties do, and I'll pick on the Libertarians and the Greens here, is they don't really get their act together until shortly before the election, and then they get caught up in, the whole game. I think most of the action for third parties needs to start now, and they need to get their voices known in the first year of the 2-year cycle and not wait till the second year.
Did the third-party advocates miss an opportunity with Ross Perot, who, of course, hit that period there where it was very popular, and you almost thought, okay, this is going to start a viable third party in the country, and it didn't really happen. Was that a missed opportunity?
I think it was definitely a missed opportunity, and where I differ with the Perot's approach, and then where I differ with the Libertarians and the Greens right now, is all the emphasis gets put at the national level, and a lot of the emphasis gets put at the presidential level. I don't think you start a third party by winning the presidency. And in fact, if you were ever so lucky as to have a third party win the presidency, I think they would fail miserably because they don't have an infrastructure. They don't have a party around them to support the operation, so to speak. In my books, and my theory is these third parties, and my progressive third party, if it gets started, they have to start at the local level or at the state legislative level, and that's where the action has to begin. If you did an analogy to sports, so someone coming out of high school very rarely, if ever, makes it to the major leagues or to the NFL or something or the NBA.
Right.
They have to go through college. They have to mature through a process. Well, I think third parties have to do the same thing. They have to start smaller. And by the way, they have to then prove they can actually get something done, and then you work your way up through the political food chain. I think a thoughtful third party would give themselves at least 3 or 4 election cycles to get to that level.
When you think back at third-party candidates, and I'll put Ralph Nader in there along with Perot, certainly more personality-driven, wasn't it? And if you take that personality out of the equation, you're really back where you started.
Absolutely. Perot was quite personality. Nader was certainly personality-driven. And right now, I would argue that many people think Trump is kind of a form of a third party. That's personality-driven. And Bernie Sanders was clearly, a personality-driven thing. But it's also leadership-driven. You have to have leadership to succeed in politics. And all 4 of these people who I just named, they have leadership qualities too. So it's personality and it's leadership.
It's interesting because as I was getting ready and getting notes together for our conversation today, and our guest, by the way, is Stephen Nemerovski. He's author of The Third Party, the new political thriller series, information at ThirdParty.today. His website, of course, is noneoftheabove.us. You can link onto our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and go directly there. It's still hard for some people to call Trump a Republican. Not that long ago was a Democrat. So you sort of see him maybe as almost in a third party. He's not really beholden to anybody because a lot of the Republicans didn't support him. Correct.
I think Trump did something that was very, very clever and ended up working for him. I think at the time he had to decide, I have found this niche, so to speak, in politics. There's a whole class of voters out there, the underrepresented voters, and I can represent them. And I believe at the time he had to decide if he was going to go the third party route or if he was going to literally, as he did, take over the Republican Party. And I think that's what he did. So he took over the party, so to speak. He's now the leader of that party. He's going to be the president of the United States. And in doing so, he found the voice of that party. Now, that particular voice is not the same voice that the Republican Party has had all these years.
Right.
So the party itself is now going to have to struggle with that. Will they coalesce around the leadership of President Trump and embrace that voice and move forward? Or will they still be fractured and wake up 2 years from now and say, well, President Trump was this or that, but he has not represented the historical Republican base. And now that historical Republican base feels like they're underrepresented. So there's a lot of push and pull that's going to go on over the next 2 years, I think.
Well, you had mentioned before the importance of having infrastructure in place. Does he have the infrastructure to be effective?
Well, I think he does because you see that he got the party's vote. If you watched the TV shows the other night, they did all their analytics and they found that, most of the Republicans came home to the Trump vote. So he's definitely got that. And I think during the campaign, he did develop a very nice base of Republican support within the establishment, we'll use that word, and within the people who've been elected to Congress, the legislators. Senator Sessions was obviously on board with him pretty quickly, but I think he's now got a sufficient group of followers. So he has an automatic infrastructure. My concern, as I said earlier, is whether or not they stick with him. There's a certain fascination with his message right now, and there's a certain fascination with having captured both the presidency and the entire Congress. So I think it behooves all of them to figure out if they can work together. And I think for that reason, just the fact that they're going to have to try it, if nothing else, that he's got enough infrastructure to move forward.
With us on the program is author Stein Nemerovski. His series Third Party, the new political thriller series. I mentioned it was part political novel, part political blueprint. As I'm reading it, it seems, again, like ripped from the headlines. This could be, you could actually be doing an account of actually what goes on behind the scenes with political parties and politics in the U.S. Is, in fact, a blueprint. If somebody read this that was interested in following it, it looks like you pretty well lay out what you can do, especially in the first volume.
Well, yeah, there's two parts, and thanks, Rick, for pointing that out. A lot of people talk about having a third party, and in fact, right now, if you look at the polling, a significant majority say we need a third party. Well, it's kind of like talking about the weather. They say, no one does anything about it. Well, I decided we needed a roadmap. We had to show people that actually could be done and how it could get there. And that's one of the significant reasons, I wrote the book and what plays out through the book, how you could actually develop a third party, develop it, again, back home at the more local level or state level, and how by literally electing a small group of people, you can force the whole paradigm to shift significantly. As you read the book, the theory is you find a legislature that's fairly tight. So if the legislature has 100 seats, and it's roughly split, 51, 49, 52, 48, just like the U.S. Senate is today, all you have to do is elect 5 or 6 people, and you disrupt the entire paradigm. No one has a majority anymore. You have this niche of 6 people now, and you can start being effective in wording to cut deals. The first deal that always gets cut is who's the Speaker of the House going to be, who's the President of the Senate going to be. And right then and there, you can get committeeships, you can set the agenda, you can do a lot of things. So it's not a complex roadmap, but as I said earlier, it does take a 2-year to 6 to 8 year time frame at least. But the roadmap is there. And the other part of it is, Rick, third party sounds very dramatic. It sounds like a nice story, and I've written a nice story. But if you win and then you can't deliver, you'll be very short-lived. So the other part of the book is a roadmap for a third party. If you get this place and you're at the table and you can make a difference, how do you then actually make that difference so the voters see that there really was a reason for the third party in the first place? Those are a couple of the themes that I weave through the novels.
And you bring such insight. I mentioned in the beginning all of the background in politics, particularly in Illinois at the state level, the House of Representatives there. And if some people think everybody sits down and their whole purpose being there is to the well-being of the state of Illinois, you've got some really sort of, I'll call it cutthroat maneuvering going on behind the scenes. And I'm assuming that's all very realistic. What we don't see happening on C-SPAN would probably shock all of us.
One of my best friends got done reading the book, and he said, I never realized how much happens in politics. And he thanked me for the educational process. That's probably the third prong of my goal in writing the books. I don't think many people understand how the system really works, how the deals really get cut. And I'm not saying it in a negative way. I'm an old-fashioned political kind of guy, and I don't mind the backroom deals, so to speak, as long as you actually get backroom deals. The best backroom deal in politics is when everybody leaves the room and they're all unhappy. But at least you got the deal. We don't get any deals in our political system anymore, and everybody's unhappy. So I wanted to, peel that back and let people have a look at it and not only see how it works, but see how it can work again in the context of a third party.
Why is that? I can recall in following politics for a number of years when both sides would go out, they would make their arguments, understand I'm not going to get all that I want. I'd like to get something, sit down, negotiate, shake hands at the end of the day, and something happened. We can fine tune it later, but something happened. Now it's like everybody's dug in and it's my way or we'll shut the government down. Why is that?
Well, my thinking, and this goes back to the website that you plugged, and thank you, I'll plug it too. It's noneoftheabove.us. My thinking, Rick, is that, and it played out this week, all the legislators, not all of them, the significant majority of the legislators know that if they do absolutely nothing, they will get reelected. And look at Congress this year. I think there was 40 some open seats. At the end of the day, for an organization, the U.S. Congress, that has a rating of what, 9% rating?
Yes.
Favorability? They have a 9% favorability rating. And we have so many political challenges. In the end of the day, they all got reelected. And for the ones that weren't running again, their party captured the seat. So you have this thing that I call incumbency protection. And if the incumbents know that no matter how bad of a job they do, or no matter how lax they are in solving problems, they're going to keep getting elected, that's why the system's broken. And that goes back to my third party theme. If you have a third party that lets some of these people know, I can take you out, I can cost you your job, well, maybe the third party won't win that election, but maybe they're going to force these people to do their job better. And that's really what I think is at the base of the problem we've had for the last 20 years now, this world of incumbency protection, whether campaign finance reform, redistricting, ballot access limitations, the voting rights limitations. All this has created an environment where the incumbents get elected every time and they don't have to produce.
And we'll talk about that on a future program. A couple minutes left on the show. Stephen Nemerovski, our guest in the program, Third Party, the new political thriller series. And you bring out in that the third party doesn't necessarily have to come in and take over controlling Congress or a particular portion of government. They really, by being backstage, can maneuver and position so that something gets accomplished. That comes about in the series Third Party. Talk briefly about Atlas Stein. He's a self-made billionaire. He risks it all and jumps in and to get something done, and then he's got a nemesis, and then we follow more on that in part two. But where did the Stein character come from? Are people based on people you know or you actually witnessed in your political career?
I get asked that all the time, and there's actually no character that's based on any one person that I know. But I have to tell you, Rick, I have had so much fun inventing this whole universe.
I can bet you have.
I mean, I've never written anything before until I ventured into this novel series. And when you get to sit down and create people and storylines and then, weave their stories together, it's just so much fun. And in the case of Stein, I guess I do draw on, my life's experiences and I pull a lot of things together. But for my story, I needed a billionaire. So it was fun to create a billionaire. But it's interesting that this is actually playing out in Illinois right now. We have a billionaire who was elected governor, and in this recent election cycle, he spent, people estimate, over $30 million of his own money to run legislative races. So my Alex Stein is kind of playing out right now in Illinois, but no, he's not designed after any one living person.
No, it's interesting as I'm reading, and we will see this play out. There are people in Washington, people possibly that elected for the first time going to Washington. It is so expensive to get there, to stay there. I'm talking about getting the seat, not necessarily living, which is extremely expensive in the Washington, D.C. area anyway. Talk about that aspect of it, because virtually, I think even on a Senate seat when you're there for 6 years, I've heard that senators basically every day have to make campaign calls to try to get contributions, so they got the war chest so they can stay there.
It's really deplorable. The amount of money you have to raise, particularly for a race in Congress or, as you said, the U.S. Senate, these can cost in excess of $100 million in the most heavily contested races. A heavily contested congressional race can cost $20, $30 million. The numbers are just staggering and ridiculous. And some of the data suggests that these people we elect are spending anywhere from a half to 2/3 of their time just raising money. So if they're spending a half to 2/3 of their time just raising money, it means we are not getting full-time elected officials taking care of our business. And that's maybe part of the problem too. If they're spending all that time just raising money, how much are they devoting to the people's business?
We'll have Steve back on the program. So much more to talk about. It is a fascinating series, Third Party, the new political thriller series. Like I said, been called part fine political novel, part political blueprint. As you're reading it, you're thinking, this, first of all, make a great movie or TV series, and it sounds so realistic. Stephen knows what he's talking about. He's been behind the scenes for a number of years. Stephen Nemerovski, our guest on the program. The website for information, ThirdParty.today. noneoftheabove.us, and you can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on to Stephen's website. Stephen, this has really been fun. The time has gone by way too quickly, and I look forward to having you back with us on the program.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun, and I'd love to be back. Thanks, Rick.
Actually, you're in Aspen. I think we'll join you there the next time that we do this particular program.
Even better. Come to my TV station, and I'll interview you, and you interview me, and we'll have fun.
That'll be fun. Then we'll ski when it's over with. It's the Third Party, the new political thriller series. All the information available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. We're back after these messages.